I saw a street interview that went viral recently where a foreigner told a local that many visitors find Japan a little too strict for them and then asked what they thought about it. What struck me wasn't the question itself, but rather the assumption and tone underneath it. My initial thought was, strict compared to what kind of society? Japan is seeing a huge surge in tourism, and as more people visit for the first time, the same stories start to be shared online about the safety and politeness and how something here feels unexpectedly grounding. So there seems to be a contradiction. How can a place that is so deeply admired also be described as restrictive? What's more interesting is that people sense Japan feels different long before they understand why, and most never fully do. People usually point to the clean streets, the low crime, and the efficient systems, but those things don't really explain the feeling, they're just the outcome. What people are actually responding to is a deeper social structure that shapes people's behavior long before rules ever need to be enforced. And that structure is built on mutual restraint and shared expectations. In many modern societies, especially in the West, we're taught that one of the highest values is self-expression. Individual success stories show up everywhere in films and social media, which gradually shapes a world where the ultimate goal is to stand out. But after living in Japan for nearly a decade, I've definitely reflected on what the cost might be when everyone is encouraged to operate this way all of the time. Personal responsibility is taken very seriously here. During natural disasters and earthquakes, people often come together to support each other. Even in daily life, on packed commuter trains and in dense cities where even just a handful of people ignoring the rules will create friction for everybody else. In places like this, trust isn't just a moral trait, it's infrastructure, and it only exists when people uphold it. Of course, systems built on this level of restraint do come with trade-offs. Not everyone thrives inside them, and the boundaries aren't always comfortable. But what becomes clear over time is that it isn't about erasing yourself, it's about knowing where the self belongs and where it doesn't. I notice this most when I leave Japan. When I was last back in the UK, I took a train up to London, and for about half of the train journey, I just had to listen to somebody else's very loud phone conversation. It wasn't anything aggressive or illegal, of course, but it was loud enough to make everyone else the unwilling audience to this person's conversation. And I probably would have shrugged this off in the past when I was living there, but having lived here for so long now in a place where this sort of behavior would be seen as deeply inconsiderate, the contrast really stood out. It subtly shifted the atmosphere of the carriage. A space that should be neutral and shared suddenly felt claimed by one person's private world. It's not surprising that many people feel more at ease here because it's essentially like a weight has been lifted off their shoulders. A weight that they didn't even realize that they were carrying. It's a sort of subconscious vigilance or anticipation of disruption. Japan still operates at a high level of trust. That trust lets you relax in public, knowing that strangers won't intrude and shared spaces will behave largely as expected. It's why you can leave your bike unlocked or your laptop unattended in a cafe as you go to order a drink. And that trust isn't accidental. It's sustained through daily participation and small acts of restraint that most visitors admire but rarely think about. It might be easy to frame that as strictness if you only take it for how it appears from the outside. But participation is more than just following rules. It means choosing every day not to let personal impulse override shared space. So instead of calling it strictness, maybe the real question is what it actually takes to sustain trust at scale, and have we become uncomfortable with the kind of restraint that makes that possible? In my first year in Japan, I taught at a public junior high school. During summer, teachers often relax their clothing a bit to cope with the heat. I had what I thought was a perfectly smart button-down shirt. It wasn't too loud or anything, in my opinion, it was just pink. Strangely, on the first day that I wore that shirt, I started receiving compliments from the other teachers. They would come up to me and say, "Oh, that's a nice shirt." I was a little bit surprised, but I was happy to get the compliments, so I wore it again and again, with each time getting the same compliments. After a couple of weeks, I received a message through my dispatch company. The school had suggested that I avoid the flamboyant colors. My immediate reaction was frustration. Why compliment me if it was a problem? Why not just tell me directly? It took me a few years to reflect on this and truly understand what actually happened. These compliments weren't random, they were gentle signals, an opportunity for me to realize that I stood out, an opportunity to self-correct without being publicly confronted about it. In their mind, they had already told me, I just simply didn't know how to read that. What I was experiencing was a fundamental Japanese concept called omoiyari. It's often translated as empathy, but it's more active than that. It's the practice of anticipating the needs or feelings of others before they are expressed. Omoiyari is not always about doing something. Sometimes not doing or saying something is also omoiyari. In the West, we often think that being direct is a kindness because we're providing clarity, but in the context of omoiyari, being direct can be seen as clumsy or even aggressive because it forces a confrontation. By giving me those compliments, my co-workers were giving me the space to change without the shame of a direct no. My pink shirt was just an instance of how I presented myself, but the system is just as sensitive to how you participate. When new residents talk about Japan being difficult, what they're really referring to is that head-on collision between their own values and a system that works entirely differently. For example, many new foreign residents find the garbage sorting rules unusually complex, or are surprised by how quickly a mistake is noticed by someone in their neighborhood. In my case, it wasn't just a polite note. In my first year of living here, one of my local neighbors actually got police involvement because I accidentally was using the wrong communal bin to recycle my plastic bottles. Of course, nothing bad came from that. At the time, it did feel a little bit excessive, and most people would definitely not escalate it that far. But as extreme as it was still a signal that, while in many places, trash might feel like an individual transaction, here, it's a communal duty. And when you get it wrong, more than just breaking a rule, you're creating work for other people. It's the difference between saying, the rain ruins my hair, and saying, the rain is why the forest is green. One is an individual inconvenience, and the other is a communal necessity. When you see it that way, the question starts to shift from, why is this so inconvenient, to, what is this protecting? In many Western societies, social friction is often handled after it appears. If a space becomes noisy or chaotic, you adapt. You might put on your headphones and adjust your expectations. And in that sense, peace becomes private labor. Whereas here in Japan, friction is often handled before it even appears, and people adjust themselves in advance. That calm that you feel here is actually prepaid through daily restraint. And restraint always has some kind of cost. It may cost spontaneity or directness, and in some cases, even self-expression. And for some, these trade-offs may feel a little bit suffocating, and whether you think that these trade-offs are worth it depends entirely on what you value. But regardless, on a large scale, all these decisions together form a society that feels predictable and safe. This doesn't appear by accident, of course. From a young age, students clean their classrooms together, they serve lunch to one another, and team events matter as much as, if not more than, individual performance. You grow up learning to account for others automatically. For foreigners who move here, it's a bit of a different story because you weren't shaped by the same experiences, and therefore the system can feel more visible and often more frustrating, especially at first. Integrating into another society can be very difficult, and it's not about trying to achieve perfection, but it's more about realizing that you can choose to join in with the choreography of the world around you instead of ignoring or resisting it. More than just a different culture, it represents a different answer to a problem modern societies are increasingly facing. How do people live together without constantly colliding? How do shared spaces remain humane without constant enforcement? Japan has always leaned towards coordination and restraint, while much of the Western world is increasingly leaning into self-definition and personal freedom. We often frame these as two opposing political or social ideologies, but really they reflect two sides of the human condition: the desire to be free and the need to belong to something beyond ourselves. But in the increasing pursuit for personal freedom, are we quietly trading away that belonging? There's a reason that so many people resonate deeply with Japan. It's because of an alignment between the way Japanese society functions and something that many of us feel deep down but never really acknowledge. The word strict carries a negative connotation. It implies rules imposed from above on unwilling people. A lot of what makes Japan feel the way that it does isn't enforcement, it's internalization. The restraint is largely self-generated, which is a fundamentally different thing. People actively want to protect the rules. This is something deeply embedded in us. For most of human history, survival depended on living in small, tightly coordinated groups. Within those groups, shared norms created relatively clear expectations about behavior, even if conflict and disagreement still existed. That wiring hasn't disappeared. What has changed, though, is our societies. In the last couple of decades especially, the social cohesion has been really disrupted by the internet and many other new technologies. In its earlier days, the internet was just something that we visited briefly. Now it's something that we exist inside constantly. The lines between the online and offline worlds are essentially being blurred. The borders between individual cultures have also started dissolving into one another. That diversity, of course, brings opportunity and creativity, but it also increases ambiguity and the risk of social fragmentation. Now, fragmentation alone isn't necessarily the issue. The issue is what happens when psychologically there is no clear shared center. Humans cooperate best when they believe that others are playing by the same rules. Many visitors of Japan point their admiration towards the temples, the aesthetics, the politeness, and the traditions. These things are all part of the marvel, yes, but what people are really connected to is the lack of social friction. Japan is socially legible for many people. While reading the room can be difficult, especially for foreigners, public behavior is often predictable enough that you can usually sense what will happen next. When you exist in this kind of society, your brain stops running all of those tiny calculations. Is this person about to cut in front of me? Do I need to keep hold of my possessions here? Is someone going to be causing issues on this train? Being able to drop all of this creates a massive drop in stress, and people feel more relaxed because they have been relieved of the burden of vigilance. Importantly, none of this means that Japan hasn't changed or that it hasn't been affected by globalization. The difference is the speed of the change. Japan is also a high-context, physical society. Much of the discipline here is tied to physical rituals that a smartphone can never replace. You still have to physically go to your neighborhood festival, you still have to physically participate in the school cleaning, and you still have to physically bow to show respect. All of these are examples of analog anchors. They keep people grounded in their immediate physical community, even while the digital world tries to pull them into the everywhere and nowhere of the internet. Of course, cohesion at this level produces its own pressures: conformity, loneliness, work intensity, and even demographic strain. Japan hasn't resisted the change, but it has layered it. Japan is a culture that layers the future on top of the past instead of completely bulldozing over it. The online world obviously exists here, but it hasn't yet succeeded in dismantling the physical expectation that you are still a participant in your local world. What might appear as strictness might just be what functional social trust actually looks like. It's not something unique to Japan either. Many Western societies have also had it. The difference is that rapid change makes those shared expectations harder to maintain, and without the intention to protect them, restraint starts to feel like an imposition rather than something that we choose to do. So is Japanese society too strict? Well, if we define strictness only by the rules that we have to follow, then perhaps. But if we start to see it as the discipline required to maintain a shared world, it starts to look like something else entirely.